fun way for us to talk about healthcare decisions month. So we're here today to talk about making a healthcare plan and enjoying some pizza. I'm going to introduce two people. We have Justin McDermott here from Touching Hearts at Home, who's been kind enough to sponsor the pizza and cookies today. And we have Cheryl Leary, who is my former boss. I'm so excited to have her here. She's here from Petco. She's the Director of Planning and Community Development over there, and we'll do an excellent job today talking about healthcare decisions month. So first I'm going to pass it over to Justin, but this doesn't work. What? Yeah.
If I turn off?
Oh, that's good.
No, still no. It worked? Oh, okay. Look at, we figured that out. All right. So I'm going to hand this over to Justin for a minute, and then Cheryl's going to turn her mic back on. And always a reminder that Walpole Media is here filming today, so if you have a question, just raise your hand, and Cheryl can either repeat the question or shut off her microphone and pass this one on to you, whatever she prefers. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Hi. Thank you. Hi, I'm Justin McDermott, owner of Touching Hearts at Home. My wife, Melissa, who's really the better-looking face of the business, couldn't be here today, but so you're stuck with me. But we provide home care services really throughout Norfolk County and kind of upper parts of Bristol County. Our office is right down the street in Walpole off Route 1. We opened up here at the end of September of 2021. My family and I actually own 3 other agencies in upstate New York, but my wife is from Norwood. I know, kind of the enemy, but she's from Norwood. She and I both went to Providence College, so I see a Providence sweatshirt in the crowd. But we help clients with things at their home, like housekeeping, meal prep, transportation to appointments, or transportation anywhere. A lot of companionship, help with showering, bathing, toileting, and that sort of thing too. So if you know anyone who might be interested, definitely give us a call. I did leave some information and some pens and notepads and brochures, so help yourself. And there's plenty of pizza left as well. Yes?
Yeah, the transportation, is it someone in a wheelchair that you can transport?
Yeah, as long as they could get into the car without, like, we don't have a transport vehicle that, you know, if they can't get out of their wheelchair. But if someone is able to get out of their wheelchair and we can put it in the back seat or in the trunk, we can definitely do that. So. Yep, we can go in and take notes during the appointment. We can sit in the lobby and just wait. So that way you're not waiting on a bus or other transportation. So we'd stay right there. But anyways, I'll turn it over to Cheryl. I think what she's going to talk about is very interesting. Having a plan is something we see with our clients and stress all the time. So very interested in learning more, and I'll turn it over to Cheryl.
Thank you.
Just turn this off.
Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah, I can hear myself, so it's got to be loud for you guys. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. So we're going to talk today about a program called Honoring Choices, which is really about advanced care planning and kind of having a way to make sure that you get the kind of care you want throughout your life. And I'll talk a little bit about who Honoring Choices is. It's a grassroots organization here in Massachusetts, and the mission is really to help promote everyday wellness, plan for the future, and receive person-centered care all through your life. And what it's really about is making sure that people age 18 and over have thought about this, have decided to make a plan, and then have committed that plan to legal planning documents that are here available here in Massachusetts. And to really make sure that people understand it's not just something you do when you're sick. It's actually better to do it when you're not. And it's really an important part of making sure you get what you want for health care. Every document that I've handed out to you that you have in packets is actually also available on the honoringchoicesmass.com website. And it's actually available in multiple languages on that website. So if you know someone that might need those documents in another language, it is available. So honoringchoicesmass.com is a great resource, and there's loads more information than just what I've given you in your packets today. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at this as something that we should do across our lifespan. I would say, judging from this crowd, We are mostly in that stay healthy, improving wellness. Maybe we have some chronic illness, but we're mostly down this end of this phase. And then it goes all the way down to getting quality care at the end of life. And what the message really from Honoring Choices is that this advanced care planning should be happening along this entire continuum. So if you're down here in this stay healthy and improve wellness, you should still be considering advanced care planning as something that's important to you. So we're going to talk today about 5 legal documents here in Massachusetts that are planning documents, and we'll go through them. And again, some of them might have a little more relevance down here on this end of the spectrum, the healthcare proxy, personal directive, and durable power of attorney. But we'll also touch on the most, which is medical orders for life-sustaining treatment, and a comfort care do not resuscitate orders. So the Honoring Choices method, and this is really an important part because this is really what makes Honoring Choices a little bit different and why we like to be, as HESCO, a partner with Honoring Choices. It's because it really views this as this 3-step process: explore, plan, and connect. So today, we're doing this explore part, right? We're kind of learning, we're thinking about things, and then we're going to talk about the plan part, which is when you actually commit what you want onto the legal planning documents. And then there's the connect part, and that's the part that a lot of people don't follow through on, I have to say. That's where you actually are making sure that the people in your life have copies of your plan, understand what directives you have given. Give them copies, give all your healthcare providers copies. So that piece gets lost a lot. I have to say I've been working for HESCO for more than a decade, and it is not uncommon for us to have a son or daughter on the phone who says, I've been digging through documents, I don't know if mom or dad ever went and did any of this legal planning, I'm not really sure. And then lo and behold, maybe a week later they found, oh, guess what, I'm a healthcare proxy. And I didn't even know I was labeled as a healthcare proxy. So that connect piece really becomes critical. It's really that part where you're including people in on your plan. So explore, this is what we're doing right now. And part of this phase is not just learning about what your rights are, which we're going to talk about, but it's also you considering what's important to you. What are your values? What kind of care do you think you would want? And it's also maybe the time when you might want to ask some questions of your doctor. And we're going to talk about some of the options later on. And some of that's kind of complicated, and you might want to talk to your doctor about what that might mean for you. And that website that I gave you, honoringchoicesmass.com, has sample questions that you can go and ask your doctor to get more information. So, that's all part of this explore phase. The plan phase is where we're going to talk about these 5 documents, and then that connect phase, where we're going to say all these documents, you're going to place all these documents in your medical records, and you're going to actually really be communicating with all the people in your life. So let's get started talking about making a plan and the healthcare proxy. This is a simple legal document. In the state of Massachusetts, you do not need an attorney to create a healthcare proxy. It is a document where you label somebody to be what's called your agent or your proxy. And that person can speak for you and actually select and decide your medical care if you are not able to. So a doctor has to actually declare that you are unable to make your decisions yourself, and that's when the proxy has that power. In your packets, there is a page that has the healthcare proxy document that is acceptable here in the state of Massachusetts. On one side, it has information and just directions about it, and on the other side, it actually has the document. And again, these are also available on that website I mentioned. So you have what you need to today to walk out of here and create a healthcare proxy document. That document asks you to list your name, your healthcare agent, which again, agent is just another name for proxy, and then also asks you to select an alternate. It's always good to have 2 proxies named. And then it gives you some space if you do want to put any limitations on their authority. You can write things in. And then you sign the form and 2 witnesses sign the form. The witnesses cannot be your proxies, okay, or your alternate proxy or your primary proxy. So as long as you have those other 2 witnesses, that proxy becomes effective. One thing you should know, the state of Massachusetts does not automatically have this succession rule where somebody is automatically has the power or is appointed as a healthcare proxy. So we know, obviously, in an emergency situation, doctors are often going to be asking for the next of kin or talking to a next of kin. But we actually don't have a law which says that next of kin is automatically the person. So your spouse is not automatically going to have the legal right to make decisions for you if you cannot do that. So it's really important to have this documented. And again, I'm not really necessarily talking about an emergency situation. Nobody's denied emergency care when they go into an emergency room because they don't have their proxy document. But it's about the care that continues after. And so it's really important to have this documented because if you are unable to make decisions for yourself, if a doctor has decided that you can't make these healthcare decisions, and there is no proxy document, then really the only way your family is going to be able to make those choices is to go to court and get the legal right through a court process. If you think about that, these are people who care about you, right? Your family or these people in your life that you've chosen. These are people that care about you, and now they have to go through the turmoil emotionally as well as financially, go through court to get the power to be able to make the choices that they want to make for you. So I think this is a gift to your family members to actually have these documents already done and completed. Now while you're legally able to make your decisions, this is the time to go ahead and create these documents. So I'm going to pause there and ask if there are any questions about healthcare proxies. Yes.
Could I have, I'm not, like you said, you can't have the person that's gonna be a proxy sign it. Could I have like my brother and sister-in-law sign off on the people that I pick?
Yes, so in terms of the form, the question was, could I have someone like my brother or sister-in-law sign on the form as long as they're different from the people that you pick as your agent and your alternate agent? That's fine as long as they are age 18 and over. Okay, so it's just 2 separate people of your choosing who are not your agent or your alternate agent.
Question. When you go to the hospital, they always ask you, do you have a healthcare proxy form?
Mm-hmm.
And you fill one out there when you're in. Does this one supersede that one?
Excellent question. So the question was, if you go into the hospital and they ask you if you have a proxy form and you might fill one out there, which is very common now, they have you fill it out right there when you're going in for any procedures. The way this form works, and actually the way all of these forms that we're going to talk about today work, the latest one is the legally acceptable one. So if you made one today, it would supersede and make all the past ones that you've created irrelevant, okay? The one today that you make is the one that's legally binding.
So when you go, if you were to go to the hospital, do you have to carry this one?
If this is the proxy that you want honored, then yes.
So you should carry this one
Yeah.
with you everywhere.
Yep, you should have it with you when you go in. What you should do is make sure that your primary care physician has it and it's in your medical record. Again, we know that not everyone gets care all the time through their primary care physician office. So there's a little bit of a burden on us as consumers and patients to make sure that we're being proactive and make sure that our providers have copies of this. So yes, I think it's something that you should have multiple copies of them.
Does the form need to be notarized?
No, the question was, does the form need to be notarized? No, it does not need to be notarized in Massachusetts. Keep in mind, other states are different, but in Massachusetts, it does not need to be notarized. Yes.
Should the people that you choose as your healthcare agents, should they have a copy in the day that you go to the hospital, that they would automatically know to get that?
Excellent question. Yes. The question was, should the people that you choose as your proxy or agent, should they have a copy of it? Absolutely yes. One thing that you will see is on the bottom of the form that Honoring Choices creates, there's actually space for your healthcare agent to sign that they've actually know and they've acknowledged that they have this appointment. It's not required to make this a legally acceptable document, and that's why it says optional on that line on this form. However, it's part of that connect, right? We talked about explore, plan, connect. It's part of that connect. It's making sure that the people you have chosen to speak for you know that you have chosen and know what you want. And we're going to talk about that next.
I thought it would be easier and quicker if they had it rather than having to go through your doctor or provider.
Yeah.
Contact somebody.
You should always, your doctors should always have it too.
Yep.
But the proxy should have it, you should have it. You know, we got to be proactive about this. Yes.
Yeah, just to follow. So if you went to emergency, you have this piece of paper. You do have this piece of paper, but you don't have it with you. But that hospital you went to, say a year ago, you went there and you provided them with a proxy. They would copy that into their data and have it as part of your record. So when you go again, you don't really have to take one with you or bring them.
Right. I mean, I think what you're saying is that once it's in the system, it should be part of your medical record. Absolutely. If you've changed your mind and made a new one, you got to make sure that new one is on file. So yes, absolutely, they would have it in the medical record. What I find challenging is, you know, we've got some hospitals are on the Epic system for, you know, some use Athena Health, some use, you know, they all have different computer systems, and they don't necessarily always communicate quickly. It doesn't mean that they wouldn't eventually get there, but it doesn't always mean that they communicate quickly. And we have a lot of people in this area that get care up in Boston, but if they have an emergency down here, they might go to somewhere local that's on a whole different system. So that's why it's really important to be proactive. Yes.
Is this a universal form in Massachusetts, or do different companies have different styles of the form?
Sure. So the question was, is this a universal form or do different companies have different styles? And absolutely, different companies have different styles. And I wouldn't say so much companies, but a lot of lawyers, if they're doing an estate plan, they will include a healthcare proxy in an estate plan, and they might have their own style of how they do it. The pieces that become critical are that you're signing it, you know, you're naming your agent, and you've got the witness signatures. So that's, yeah, so Honoring Choices has created this document as an easy document that is legally acceptable. Yes?
Is this just for Massachusetts? Let's say you were traveling or, you know, somewhere visiting family, and would this be applied or not?
Yeah, I mean, so when you're a resident of Massachusetts, you know, this is what you bring with you. So yes, if you're traveling, it should be honored. I mean, you know, I can't speak for everything out there, every circumstance, but yes, in general, these rights travel with you because your home state is Massachusetts, and that's where you've created the legally acceptable documents. Any other questions before we move on? All right. You guys had great questions. Thank you. So now we're going to talk about a personal directive, also known as a living will. It's really important to know that in Massachusetts, we do not have living will legislation. So this is actually not a legally binding document, okay? But this is your opportunity to voice what you would want, what your wishes would be for care, so that your proxy has something, some type of guide, if they do have to make decisions for you. I'm going to tell you, I call this document the gift you give your proxy, right? Because when you think about that, and many of you may have been in the position of having been a proxy for someone else. It's a tough job. It's not easy to make healthcare decisions. Even when you really think you know the person and you really think you know what they want, you're always going over it in your mind. It's emotional, it's hard. These are people you care about. It's really tough to make these choices. If they have a roadmap to the choices from you that you have outlined, that's a gift. You know, that's really a gift for them. And that's your way of thanking them for being your proxy, really. And so this is really where you can get specific. You'll see in your packets and on the website that there is sort of a guideline. Again, it's not a legally binding document, so you can write this up in whatever way you want, but it's a guideline. It asks you questions about what's important to you, what would you want. And so you can take your time to write that down and really make sure that your proxy has a copy, has seen it, knows where to find it. Because really, this is the way that they're going to know and feel confident in their choices and decisions, and the way that you make sure that you get the care you want across your life if you can't speak for yourself. So I'm going to come back to this personal directive when we talk later about the MOST form. So keep this in mind. We're going to revisit this one. But any questions right now about the personal directive? Yes.
The healthcare proxy, the same thing as the durable power of attorney.
Okay. So the question is the healthcare proxy the same thing as a durable power of attorney? It's often also put it together with a will, right? So no, they are actually very different things. We're going to talk about the durable power of attorney next. And often though, an attorney will do an estate plan and they might package it all together. So you might have it all together in one sort of document from your attorney, or package of documents from your attorney. But they do very different things. So we're going to talk about the durable power of attorney next. If anyone, any more questions on the personal directive?
Is it necessary to have an attorney do your will, or can I just write what I want to write, or the instructions that I want to give, have it notarized and give it to the...
That's a really good question. It's about, the question is it necessary to have an attorney do your will, or can you write out what you want and have it notarized? I do not think that that would probably really be recommended, to just write it out and be notarized. I think you really want a legally binding document. So I really do think that you want to work with an attorney when you're working on a will.
It's not legally binding, so I'm like, and I recently contacted someone because that's what I wanted to do, and I'm like, well, did I need that, or did I not? Should I just write it and be done?
Yep. Now, and there are some forms, and we're going to talk about this next, that, you know, there are boilerplate forms. I do believe there are boilerplate forms you can find online about a will and fill it out. And I think you just want to get some advice before you use something like that.
Are there specific, well, what's the easiest way to find, what do I look up to find somebody that I really want to do my will?
Okay, so that was a question of what's the easiest way, or how do you find somebody to do your will? Actually, I would say you would look for the Massachusetts Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. So they have a website. You can plug in your zip code, find attorneys that specialize in elder law and estate planning, and that's, you know, probably the best way to go.
I think we have that in the COA here.
Do they have some attorneys that sometimes come in? Yeah, absolutely. All right, so next we're going to talk about the durable power of attorney. So the difference between the healthcare proxy and the durable power of attorney. Your healthcare proxy is over here in this lane, making decisions about your healthcare. The durable power of attorney is in this lane, making decisions about your finances. All right, so those two decision-making powers are separated. So it's very important that you select someone to be your durable power of attorney. I am going to tell you, I can say this with certainty, if your healthcare proxy is activated, I'm pretty sure it's going to mean you have medical bills. Somebody has to pay those bills. Somebody has to have the right to make those care payments and choices for you. So you really need to have this side of your life also figured out. So it doesn't have to be the same person. It can be different people. I know in my personal family, the people I would have in charge of my money would be very different than the people I'd have in charge of my health. All right? So, you know, you got to go with the people in your life and really recognize the role they have. The way, in the state of Massachusetts, as we were discussing with Wills, there are boilerplate documents that you can get online and download and create one. You don't actually have to go to an attorney to do this. However, there is a tremendous amount of power you are giving this person. So Honoring Choices really does not recommend you do that. You really need to use an attorney who understands the ins and outs of the power that you're giving this person and can work with you on how that power should be written out and how, if any, there should be any limitations. And I'll give you an example, because there's a difference between healthcare proxy and power of attorney, where a healthcare proxy, a doctor has to decide and invoke that and say that this person cannot make their decisions anymore. If a power of attorney is a power of attorney, there's nobody deciding that you can't make your financial decisions anymore. So they have that power. As an example, my son was out of the country for many months, and he was unavailable for a period of time. But, we had talked before he left. He had given me his power of attorney, and I knew that he was going to need a vehicle when he came home. And I was able, because I had his power of attorney, to purchase a vehicle and register a vehicle in the state of Massachusetts without using his money and in his name, because I had his power of attorney. Now, he's of completely sound mind. There was nobody had to declare that he was unavailable to make this choice or do this, complete this action. I just had the right to do it. So you do have to be pretty careful about creating this document and deciding who in your life you're going to give this power to. It's something that you need to give a lot of thought to, and it's something that you probably really should use a lawyer and create that document. Now, in your packets, there is an information sheet about durable power of attorney that might just answer some of the questions and stuff, but we don't give out those boilerplate sheets because we don't think it's a wise decision to do it that way. So, any questions about a durable power of attorney?
Does the elder law attorney handle all of these things?
Yeah.
Or do you need different attorneys to do that?
So, an elder law attorney can handle all of these things. It's usually called an estate plan, and often they package a price together. I'm not an expert by any means in that. I'm a social worker. I do other work, but certainly that happens all the time. What I want you to know is you can walk out of here and have what you need to create a healthcare proxy and a personal directive. You do not need an attorney for those two things. And I think that's the point I want to drive home. Like, do this today. Get that done today. You can do this. You have what you need in your packets and through that website. So I encourage you to, at the very least, select your agent today, if you have not done so. So Comfort Care do not resuscitate orders. Now we're kind of getting to where maybe people are making decisions around what type of care they might want. And Comfort Care do not resuscitate, or DNRs, have been around for a long time. Those are orders that your physician can sign off on. There are limitations to these orders. And they're still legally acceptable in the state of Massachusetts. They're still valid documents, but they really only deal with restarting a heart and breathing. They only deal with CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation. So that's like one facet of care, right? That's one thing. That's all they really do. Is you make your choice that you do not want to be resuscitated. That's a do not resuscitate order. So, if that's important to you, and if you've made one of these in the past, don't worry, it's still legally binding. But we have moved on in Massachusetts to now allow another type of document called the MOLST, which we'll move on to next, which is a little more expansive, so we'll talk about that. But are there any questions about the Comfort Care or do not resuscitate orders? Yes.
Okay, I know what, do not resuscitate, but what about if you're not really, your body's still in shape that, if you have that
but you're really not ready to go.
Sure, right. So the question is, what if you're still kind of healthy and maybe you're down and remember that spectrum we put on the up here earlier where you're in that everyday wellness phase, and so maybe a do not resuscitate is not for you, and maybe you put something in your personal directive about the parameters of when you would want CPR or when you wouldn't.
I mean, if I hit my head today and something happened, I fell here, and if I had the do not resuscitate and they had to do something like that, they wouldn't do it.
Correct.
But if it's not my time to go yet, I would want
Right.
to be resuscitated.
So what you might not want to put together a do not resuscitate order. What you might want to do is in your personal directive, outline the parameters of when you might want to be resuscitated and when you might not. And that's when you can give your voice a little bit more and have it written in that personal directive.
I mean, if I was in an accident and I was stuck on a machine for the rest of my life, I don't want to be alive.
Right.
Right.
So,
But there's times right now that, I don't feel I'm ready to go anywhere.
sure, absolutely, right? And we don't want you to go anywhere. So we're good with that choice and decision right now.
Fell right now here, hit her head,
So
they would resuscitate her.
if she fell right now and hit her, yes. Unless somebody whipped out an order, right, and said no. True, right? If an emergency services professional does not know for a fact, physically see a DNR order or some type of MOST form saying some other order, they will perform life-saving measures to the greatest extent.
And your family cannot sue them.
Yeah, absolutely. They're protected from any type of lawsuit or anything like that. Yes.
I had a do not resuscitate on my dad, and he got double pneumonia, and they took him to Norwood Hospital. And while I was in the hospital, the nurses said, well, he's going to die anyways, and all this stuff. I said, no, I think I'm going to resend the DNR.
Mm-hmm.
I want him to go upstairs, and I want you to work, because it wasn't heart related. He had double pneumonia.
Sure. So,
He was older, but still. So I rescinded the DNR order,
mhm.
and he went upstairs, and he did pass away, but it was like a couple of weeks later.
Sure. So the question is sort of, or if I can reframe that a little bit so that everybody can understand, is you were caring for someone that did have a DNR, and they were ill, and when they went to the hospital, though, because the illness wasn't necessarily related to heart function, you rescinded that DNR because you wanted him to have more time, and you felt like that was important. And I'm assuming you had a healthcare proxy power, so you could make that choice and decision for him. And that's what we've been talking about, where you can change your mind and you can redo these documents at any point in your life, and the latest ones are what's considered legally binding. So you had the power as healthcare proxy to make that choice and decision to rescind that DNR, and then that becomes the legally accepted treatment that he can now have CPR.
Die of a heart attack or stroke, and he says, yeah, put a DNR on me. So I did, but he didn't die of that. He died of pneumonia.
Right. So it's a matter of really, like, you acted in that capacity as his healthcare proxy to really figure out what his path would be. And again, so thank you for respecting his wishes and for doing and caring for him in that way. Yes.
If a person has an emergency alert bracelet,
Mm-hmm.
and they have DNR on it, how do they do it so that it's like they can write something on it that says C instead of DNR, change it to see my medical report, or something that, is there something that they won't do?
Yeah, so that's, the question is if you have a medical alert bracelet that asks you to see your paperwork, see your personal directive or something like that. I think we're getting into territory where it's not my specialty, where I don't want to give you wrong information, and I'm not, my understanding is that for a DNR to be honored, they really need to actually see the DNR form. That's my understanding. So I honestly don't know enough about how medical alert bracelets work in terms of maybe that is a possibility, and I don't know enough about that. So I don't want to say for sure that that's the way. Yeah, did you have a question? No. Oh, I'm sorry.
In regards to do not resuscitate, did I get it wrong? It's only in regards to restarting your heart, like in my...
Exactly. So the question is, in regards to a do not resuscitate order, is it only about restarting my heart? Yes. It is only about the performance of CPR, which is meant to restart your breathing and your heart should those stop. Okay? That is all it covers. So that's why we're going to talk about the MOST. So why don't we move on to the MOST? So the MOST, that acronym stands for Medical Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment. So typically, we use MOSTs now here in the state of Massachusetts with people who have advanced or serious illness. So it's more often, remember that continuum we put up on the screen before, it's more often the people on that end who are want to make sure they get quality end-of-life care. So it's a physician order, so only a physician assistant, or a nurse practitioner can sign off on a MOST. Okay, so you have to do it with one of those 3 practitioners. And so if you want to have a MOST on file, though, you can go to your doctor and you can talk to them about what your choices are and work through what those would be with them and have your physician sign it. So what's different about the MOST, as we're going to talk about, is that it's much more expansive. So where the limitation of a DNR is where it's only about restarting your heart, the MOST is going to cover a lot more. And the other thing about a MOST is that it's really supposed to travel with you from care setting to care setting. It's legally accepted at all possible care settings. It's accepted in the hospital, in a rehab, at home, wherever you are. Whereas the comfort care and do not resuscitate orders don't necessarily always follow you, right? If you make it up in the hospital in Boston, the hospital down here is not gonna necessarily know about it. But, and they may not necessarily know to honor it, but the MOST form is legally binding in whatever care setting you are in. They actually even put the original MOST form on like a bright pink paper, so it would be easily found in like a medical chart. But copies are acceptable and they don't have to be on the bright pink paper. So this is where everyone is really legally required to follow your choices that you have selected on a MOST. And you can make changes just like all these other documents. Whichever one you do, the latest one that you do is the legally binding one, as long as you're capable of making those decisions for yourself. Your healthcare proxy could make changes to your MOST if you are not able to make those changes. So when you look at the MOST in your packet, I would ask you to kind of pull that out and take a look at it. And again, this is available on the website, honoringchoicesmass.com. And the MOST form, if you look at it, actually has a lot of different options on there. And I think when we think about life-sustaining treatment, first of all, we think about CPR, right? And then what else do we think about? The breathing tube, the big ventilator, right? Like those are the only 2 things we really think about, I think. We're the Grey's Anatomy people, right? We've watched we've watched them restart hearts and people are zipping back after that, right? But let's face it, there's a lot to medical care. There's a lot more going on and a lot more options. So I think the MOST fills in the gaps of what a DNR can't do, right? So if you look at some of those options, when you even look at ventilation, one of the options is non-invasive ventilation, like a CPAP machine. I'm not a medical professional. I wouldn't necessarily know that was even something I could write in my personal directive. I wouldn't necessarily have known that, right? If you flip the page over and you're looking at artificial hydration, I'd never thought of that. Artificial nutrition, dialysis. There's a lot to life-sustaining treatment, and you have choices. You know, you have the ability to write down what's important to you. And if you look at that MOLST form, it says things like, not at all, yes, but for a short term only, or yes, right? Like, so, you know, the short term only, wow, I didn't think about that. Maybe I want to give myself a chance to recover. Maybe I think I'll give myself a couple weeks to see if I rebound a little bit, and if I don't, then I'm okay. You know, like with another decision. So I think the most, for the people who are on the end of the spectrum down here, where you're just kind of trying to figure out in everyday planning, I think the MOLST is a useful tool to then go out and fill out your personal directive. Because really the personal directive is where you're going to list out what it is you might want right now. And the MOLST kind of informs us as what some of those options are. And I think that if you want to learn more about what some of these options might mean for you or just in general, you know, have that conversation with your physician. Bring this form in. Ask them what it means. It's the opportunity to really learn more about what your choices and options are. So I always tell people, use this MOLST form when you're making out your personal directive. It'll give you some guidance and some ideas about what some of the things are that you might want to be thinking about. And what you'll find is we see MOLST forms being used more and more often now. Anyone that goes into rehab is required to do a MOLST upon admittance if they don't already have one. So again, know that if you actually have done that, if you've gone into a rehab facility and you filled out a MOLST, that's still now the legally binding document if you haven't done another one. And you should have copies of that. This is like everything else, you know, we should be empowered to make sure that we have copies of this. This is our healthcare, right? These are our decisions that we're making. Make sure you keep those copies. And even though it's written right into the legislation that MOLST follows you to your care setting, if they don't know you have it, how are they going to know to follow it, right? So we have to be proactive on that too. And if you have a MOLST, you should have it at home. You should have copies at home with you. And, you know, your agents should have copies. So that's sort of the MOLST. Any questions about those documents? All right, I think I'm gonna just put up the honoringchoicesmass.com website. Again, this is a website, this is a group that's really just about educating and informing people, making sure information is available to you. Everything we've talked about and way more is on the website, and again, in multiple languages. So I encourage you to really get that proxy form filled out. Make sure by the end of today, you've selected a healthcare proxy. Any questions?
How about a HIPAA release form? See, I
Okay.
just had a lot of this done with a lawyer.
Sure.
He had us do that HIPAA
Yep.
release form.
So the question is, how about a HIPAA release form? So a HIPAA release form is where, you know, you're giving permission to your medical providers to speak to somebody else, and you name that person in there. So if the medical provider is invoking the proxy, you know, you automatically are now able to get that information. So if you're the proxy. So, but a HIPAA release is certainly something, and I've seen that before, where attorneys build that into an estate plan. Great idea. You know, I think it's very valuable. And what that does is before a proxy would be invoked, it would still allow a release of information. So if that's important, you don't need an attorney to do that. You can do that right with your physician office. They'll give you the HIPAA release form and you can fill it out. So, yes.
If I don't fill out these forms and something happens to me, wouldn't my husband be able to speak for me legally?
No.
No.
That's what we were talking about at that screen. There's no automatic succession law in Massachusetts. So no. So,
Wants to get rid of you, and he says, "Do not."
you know, I'm gonna make sure. So I want to put that in context. You know, people don't get denied emergency care, right? Like, you know, and emergency care is going to happen. And yes, they will look for a next of kin to maybe make a choice in an emergency room. We are talking about what goes on beyond that. So, but no, there is no automatic succession law. And did I see another hand up? Yes.
Do they choose things, like my son just experienced where their father, who was under 65, got hit in the head, and they didn't think he was ever gonna come back. And they had to make a decision after they did an MRI, which was even controversial, because he had bullets in his arm and shrapnel from being shot in the line of duty. So it was heartbreaking.
So,
I don't even didn't
yeah. So what you're saying is just,
watching my children go through that.
so you're talking about just how hard it is, right? You had an experience, a personal experience with how hard it is to have to make those choices and decisions. It's heart-wrenching. And that's why we don't want to add undue burden, right, to those people that we do select as our proxies. You want to have that personal directive filled out. You want to do this now while you can, while you have the legal right to sign your name on these forms. You know, you want to do this now, and that's the gift that we can give them. And it's hard no matter what. I think everyone can relate to what you're saying, just making those choices and decisions for a parent. Many of you in this room have probably been in that position and how hard it is. And so what I hope this presentation does is give you a path of where you can maybe take some of that burden off and make the path a little more clear for those people that are going to be someday helping you. And do you have a question?
So all these documents that you talked about, including the COA, they're all valid unless you change it, basically, right?
Right. So the latest one is the legally binding one. Yes.
A durable power of attorney, though, being a former banker, that dies with you.
Okay. Yes. And then you get into like an executor of an estate and a need for a will. Yes. Absolutely.
Now,
Yes.
how old is this form? How new? How long has it been around? Because I, as a retired nurse, I identify as...
Oh, the most form? The question is, how long has the most form been around? I think Massachusetts put most legislation in place somewhere in like that 2012, 2013 timeframe. That's when we became a most state. It's kind of a movement that's gone across the country. In some states, it's called a POST, physician orders for life-sustaining treatment. And there's other grassroots organizations in other states that are doing this kind of work, like honoring choices. I think the one in Minnesota is called Respecting Choices. I think Rhode Island has one.
The other question I would like to know is because it doesn't address, and maybe you do that on one of the other forms when you write down what your particulars are, because you can be on a ventilator and intubated ad nauseum, you know, for as
Right.
long as your brain is, and is there any incorporation into, like if you're on life support, if you have decreased brain.
Right, so you can be specific about what, you know, and yes, so you have the power to do that. I would encourage you to write stuff like that. You yourself, the question, let me repeat the question actually. The question is there an opportunity, you know, we're looking at the most form where if like, you know, maybe you're on life support, and what if things start to decline? Other things like, you know, other aspects of your health start to decline. Is there an option to write in that that's at the time when you'd want to perhaps cease life-sustaining treatment? And the answer is you have the ability now. If you have sort of very specific ideas on what's important to you, write them down, commit them, right? Put them on that personal directive and talk with them about your doctor in the context when he's working with you on this most. Because that form, the most, can only be signed by a doctor.
Because that I have found in the past only in situations I've been involved in, not really personally, but as a healthcare provider, where that's the hardest decision you're ever going to have to.
Absolutely.
Someone make.
Yeah. So the comment is that that's one of the hardest decisions to make, and when you're trying to choose when to terminate life support. And absolutely, I think we can all agree with that statement. And that's why the more specific and you can document your wishes, the more likely those wishes are going to be followed. Any other parting thoughts or questions? Oh, yes.
I took care of my mother for a long, long, long time. I saw a lot of stuff. Sorry, I saw. She had, in the last couple of weeks, I took her home because they were starving her to death.
Oh, gosh.
So I took her home and I took care of her till she died. Now, she was 95, or just shy of 95. We had that service come in, I forget the name of it, but they would come in and check.
Did hospice?
Yes.
Mhm.
And they were marvelous,
Yeah.
but they wanted to shoot her up with
Morphine.
morphine, and that would have killed her.
Yeah, I'm sorry that it was so hard.
Vials and vials of it left. Now my concern is this. This is not legal. You can't just come in and kill someone. You can't do those things, but yet it's being done quietly. And I'm afraid that when
Right, so.
I don't want anyone near me. I'll just die. Let God take me, but I'm not allow you to take me.
So I understand what you're saying, and you have your reasons for having some very strong feelings about sort of this idea of end of life care and who you want even involved in your care. And so I think what you should do is really look at this personal directive document and just be very clear about that as you decide what your wishes are, because clearly you have very strong thoughts about that, and I understand that, and I think you should write those down and make sure that people in your life know that. Any other thoughts or questions? So I'm from HESCO, the Area Agency on Aging and Aging Service Access Point. So I will hang around after if there's any questions about HESCO or about honoring choices. So thank you, everybody. You were a great group.